This meeting is being recorded.
We're good to go.
All right, great. So welcome, everybody. So being Wednesday, February 1st, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. and having quorum, I'd like to call the Bridgewater Planning Board to order. I'm just going to read a quick disclosure regarding the meeting protocol this evening. Pursuant to the governor's order regarding the open meeting law, MGL Chapter 38, Section 17, the governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Bridgewater Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. There is no in-person attendance of members of the public, and every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time. The meeting is being recorded, and within 48 hours, we'll post a link of the recording on the town's website and on our social media page. The following members of the Bridgewater Planning Board that participated remotely this evening: I'm Patrick Driscoll, Chair, Mr. Raymond Ajemian, Ms. Astrid Rojas, Mr. Stephen Geller, MJ Spagon, and Mr. Ted Haley. Mr. McDonald won't be joining us this evening.
Just also at Miss Astrid Rojas will not be attending as well. I got an email from her.
Oh, okay, I apologize. Mr. Rojas will be there this evening. During the meeting, all votes will be taken as roll calls. The following Bridgewater Town staff will also be participating remotely. Excuse me. I'd like to welcome the new Community Economic Development Director, Mr. Robert Ruley, Mr. Shane O'Brien of Town Plan, and Mr. Greg Tansey, our Town Engineer. At this point, all the public's mics are muted. And the board's mics will be unmuted to the whole meeting. As items appear on the agenda, the project's representatives' mics will be unmuted. If the project is a public hearing and allows for public comment, we ask that you use the chat feature to ask your question by listing your name, address, and your question. The host, who is Mr. O'Brien this evening, will recognize the questions in order. You can also use the raise my hand feature on the participant menu, and you will be unmuted when the host recognizes you. Again, please state your name and address before asking a question. If you're on the phone, you may dial *9 or raise your hands. So we'll continue to the agenda. We do have a public hearing posted for this evening. Item 2, continued public hearing 0 Jasmine Way, map 72, lot number 5, MSF Property Holdings LLC. This is a site plan review of the section.
We can't hear you.
Oh, I'm not speaking. I just my computer just. This is a site plan review under section 10.6 of the Bridgewater zoning ordinance. This is continued from January 18th, 2023. Mr. O'Brien, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. We also have an additional request for a continuance until our next meeting for February 15th, 2023 for this particular project. So I'll leave it up to the board to hold a vote. The applicant is making some adjustments to their plans based on some comments from staff, but they have assured me that they will be attending the next meeting in hand, and as well as presenting some updated plans for the 15th.
Great. Are there any board questions or comments, Mr. O'Brien?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Are there any board questions for Mr. O'Brien at this point?
Oh, okay.
No. I'll make a motion to continue this hearing for 0 Jasmine Way to the next planning board meeting on February 15th.
Second.
Second for discussion. Just quick, do we have anything else on that evening so far, Mr. O'Brien?
We will have the subdivision rules and regulations update. I do have it on the agenda tonight, so I just want to provide a quick update. And I don't believe we have any site plan or special permits. We may have some additional requests for lot releases. However, nothing on the agenda.
All right, great.
Beyond that.
All right, if there's no further discussion, I'll take the roll. Mr. Ajemian?
Yes.
Mr. Geller?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, next item, item 2. This is again Mr. O'Brien. Planning board subdivision rules and regulation update. I believe this is continued from our last meeting as well, correct?
Yeah, I just kept on the agenda, just to make, as long as we're looking to do updates for the rules and regulations, I'll just keep it on the agenda as a point of discussion. Like I said, I know we have members of the public here. These subdivision draft rules and regulation updates are available on the website if anyone would like to check them out. And if anyone from the board has any comments in terms of some things that they may have seen or through reviewing it that can be changed. I know the last discussion we talked about updating some of the standards, which would be adding vertical granite curbing to subdivisions that are, I think, above four units on a subdivision or 4 lots, as well as I think some other things as well. So if anyone has any questions, comments, I'm happy to make those updates both online and offline.
Have you made any further adjustments from what we've seen at that last meeting, the red line that you provided?
No, not this time. I'm just in the process of kind of gathering more discussions with staff in terms of some other updates we expect to see for the 15th.
So I just have a question. So we're talking about having a full discussion on the 15th, not tonight, correct?
Correct. I think at the last meeting, the board indicated that we would want a more
Right.
fuller discussion for the 15th.
Right, but I think that's fine because when we talked about the trees that you suggested, by the 15th, hopefully we'll have 2 new members on the tree committee and we'll be able to give you some sort of a progress report regarding the trees. So that'll be good in my mind.
Sounds good to me.
Mr. Geller?
No, I'm good.
Anyone else? So just a quick question, Shane. The 15th, is that going to be a posted, that'll be the meeting to adopt the changes, or is that just for the more in-depth discussion?
Just for more in depth, you know, I would say that it's something that I don't expect the board for the 15th to approve it. It's fine if you guys would like to, but I'm sure we can take our time with this in terms of crafting a solid document. You know, I called it the 2022 update, but we can call it the 2023 update. And I think if we take our time with it through maybe early spring, we can really formulate a quality document.
I agree.
Great. Anything else? If not, moving on. All right. Item 4 on the agenda. This is a discussion with the Community and Economic Development Director, Mr. Bob Rulli. Mr. Rulli?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to get my PowerPoint up here. So I appreciate the opportunity to be joining you tonight. It is my plan to continue to join you for future meetings as well. Just entering my 4th week in the position now and feel like I'm totally getting up to speed. Very fortunate to have Shane and Nicole to fill me in on things that I don't know. Had a chance to meet some of you. Look forward to meeting all of you. So tonight I would just like to review kind of what my experience is and what my understanding of the expectations that the manager, the assistant manager, and the council have for me in this position, and also to get feedback from you as the planning board. So what I would like to discuss tonight is a little bit about me, talk about what current market conditions are, conversation about Central Square, alternative development options. For those that don't know, we'd like to talk about form-based code, transit-oriented development in MBTA communities, infrastructure and impact fees, planning and zoning amendments, and then get your comments and thoughts. So most recently, I was the director of planning and community development in Warren, Rhode Island. I was there for 5.5 years. My career has been split between the public sector and the private sector. I've worked in Arlington, Virginia. I've worked in Tioga County, New York, and then I've also done privatized military housing throughout the country. So I bring a different perspective. I like to say that I'm not the typical government guy, because I think I have perspective from both the private sector side and the public sector. So fortunate that I'm coming in when the town has just recently adopted your comprehensive master plan. Having lived through the saga of developing comp plans in other communities, I can say that this is one of the better ones that I've seen. And I think that having it be a fresh document and me coming in fresh, there are a lot of things that we can hit the ground running on. And I look forward to that, but also look forward to, as we do that, getting input from this board. So just looking at what current conditions are, and this is with respect to new construction, and the data sources for this are ABG CoStar and what was my other one? Advent. So looking at the 495 South, Route 3 South submarkets, which is what Bridgewater is, construction costs for new commercial development with the exclusion, this does not include land or what I call dirt cost. You're looking at $301 to $361 per square foot. Mid-rise commercial, $499 to $719, and then retail right now is at $309 to $371. With those kinds of construction prices and land costs associated with that, you're going to see developers need to have credit tenants to take that space. When you look at what vacancy rates and average asking rates are, office right now, vacancy rate is about 6.8% in this market, which is actually pretty good in comparison to what Metro Boston is. Class A office space, triple net is going at $24, Class B about $19. Triple net is that the tenant is still paying property tax, insurance, operating costs. So, that could add another $15 on a Class A space. And then on retail, Class A, you're seeing $23. So that kind of rent really requires that you're getting what we call credit tenants. A bank can get comfortable lending money to a developer, knowing that he's going to bring in a tenant that is going to be able to pay the rent. So I just wanted to start out with a little bit of levity because this is Central Square and we all know what a vortex it is trying to cross. The crosswalks picture on the left, I really found amusing because in that picture, there's 7 signs in that picture, and a stop sign, don't turn this way, go this way, and then 2 red lights. I really couldn't understand why you have a stop sign and 2 red lights, but obviously it's an area we need to focus and have a conversation on. So just respect to Central Square, and I know it's a priority for some council members as well as the community and the town manager. I mean, these are just my observations, thoughts, and random questions. There have been numerous studies that have looked at traffic and parking. I don't disagree that traffic flow signage and parking need to be looked at. Pedestrian safety and the perception of safety is very critical to that area being vibrant again. Downtown Bridgewater is a very walkable community. How do we leverage that? Two-way traffic has been discussed for one side of Central Square on the green. Typically, two-way traffic works good in downtown area when you have retail or office buildings or buildings on both sides of the road, where it's been suggested here, you do not have that. So it may or may not be a good solution. There was a committee meeting for the downtown business or downtown development portion of the council last week. The manager and I have reached out to Old Colony Planning Commission and Mass Department of Transportation. We expect to have some meetings with them in the next 3 or 4 weeks to discuss this a little bit further with input from the fire department, highway, as well as the police. The area was designated as an opportunity zone. It's had absolutely no impact. I had the same experience in Warren. I had our downtown designated as an opportunity zone. For you, those of you that don't know what an opportunity zone is, it was a economic development initiative under the Trump administration that was designed to give capital gains relief to investors if they bought into properties in an opportunity zone. There's really not enough critical mass in the downtown area of these small towns like Bridgewater for that to be attractive to people with capital gains. There is also, in my opinion, a need to develop better partnerships between businesses, property owners in the town. One of the first questions that I asked when I initially was considering taking this position is, what the collaboration level was between the town and Bridgewater State. I think that needs to be expanded on and leveraged. There are some success stories in downtown. I mean, Restoration Coffee, Juice Mill are very successful, but I like to refer to downtowns as smiles, and I would say that our section of downtown in Central Square is in need of dental work. We need to fill some of those gaps in. And I think, we need to have an honest conversation as to whether current zoning is hurting or helping the revitalization of downtown. So parking is an issue that's come up a couple times when I've talked to council members. This is Google Earth from June 6, 2022. And when I look at this from space, I see lots of vacant parking spots. This was a Tuesday, I believe, so it wasn't like a Sunday morning. I think similar to Bridgewater, many small towns in the Northeast, they don't have parking problems, they have parking management problems. Either people can't find the parking, or we don't have really clear lines of communication with respect to shared parking, or it's hard for people to find it. We could do better with signage. I mean, that's something we need to focus on. But again, if you look at this picture, there is ample parking. And when I was looking through some of the parking studies that had been done in the past years, at peak, the available parking was at 63% in the downtown area. So there's definitely, again, there is parking. It's just having people find that parking. I do agree that I think the angled parking along Central Square should be eliminated. I mean, it's dangerous and it's not effective, but that's something that I think we'll continue to have a conversation on. Looking at the different policies as set forth in the recently adopted comprehensive master plan, looking at a strategy to revitalize it is definitely a priority. I think there's some additional work that needs to be done to the Central Square study from 2020. We just talked about parking and parking management. So those are all things that we will look at. The time frame for these is near term, midterm. I met with the manager today, and my feeling is everything is short term or near term. I mean, we don't have the luxury of pushing some of these things off. Seek help from mass development to study feasibility trade-offs using DIF funding and review and strengthening the mixed use ordinance. Those are all things, again, I think we can look at. I'd like to do that in the short term. I can tell you that we will be looking to apply for some community development block grant money, whether that's for facade improvements, downtown revitalization, or even establishing a revolving loan fund to help some of these businesses incentivize to improve their buildings. We're putting in applications through mass development for a community planning grant. We tend to use that to look at whether or not we can use DIF funding to make some improvements. And then we're also putting in a grant application for the Massachusetts Downtown Initiative. Both of those are going in on Friday. I think there's an opportunity. I know there's a committee looking at it, but nothing has really come forward. But I think there's an opportunity for us to do something special with the old town hall. I think that, in my opinion, using that for some types of arts and cultural type facility in partnership with the university is something that should be discussed. I think there's the ability to get some historic money as well as some arts money in order to do those improvements. But I think also that would be a reason to attract people, put people on the street and on the sidewalks. So this is what we see a lot of in Southern New England. And I like to refer to this as 1950s, 1960s planning, when there really wasn't any planning, where you have one-story park in the front buildings that are underutilized. I don't want to see much more of this. I mean, my goal is always to eliminate this. So what I'd like to do next is just kind of walk through a visioning exercise. I'm going to borrow on my experience in Warren, because I think there's a lot of similarities to areas of Warren to Bridgewater. This property that you're looking down here now is what we refer to as the Job Lot Plaza. It was formerly a Stop and Shop. Stop and Shop moved down the road 3 miles, built a new store. Royal Hold, who is the parent company for Stop and Shop, obviously didn't want another supermarket to go in there. So They backfilled it with an Ocean State job lot, and then there's a lot of other not real high use tenants in that space. It's 12 acres. 8 of those acres are impervious surface area. So when I started to look at this, I mean, we looked at, okay, you know, what kind of visioning exercise can we go through? And when we talk about redevelopment, I mean, I totally understand that people can't see things in the abstract, so it's better that we create visuals for them. So the first thing we did was we mapped out what the parking looked like. And then as you can see, there's more parking than could ever be used at this site. And then we looked at, you know, for those of you that don't know, I mean, this is what we call a massing study. What can we get on that site? I mean, does it have to be one big building? Does it have to be 3 big buildings? Or, you know, what are the different uses that we can get on that site? And one of the things that I wanted to include, because we were in conversations with Roger Williams University, which is 4 miles down the road, they had a need for a performing arts center. So we programmed in a performing arts center on this location that would benefit the university as well as the community. So as we start to go through this exercise, so we know what we have for the property, and now we can start to drop some buildings on there. And then we play around with different scenarios. What do those buildings look like? What kind of green space can we have? What are the types of uses? And we move things around. And at the end, we had, I think, 6, 7, 9 buildings, including the Performing Arts Center. They had 179 residential units and 55,000 square feet of commercial space. Not all in one building. I mean, no building in this location was more than 4 stories. Most are 3 and 4. Combination of rental properties as well as for sale townhouse units, green space. One of the things we were trying to capitalize on, this is a state road that abuts it, was to make this more transit-oriented development. In this case, it would be bus. Warren was centrally located between Providence and Newport. Newport was growing their blue technology. Providence has a lot of expansion in their commercial corridors. And then we had the new MBTA station in Fall River, which is 10 minutes away. So as then we evolve that, we start to look, okay, what would these rooftops look like? Where would this buildings look like? You know, what does this begin to look like? Until we get to this. So again, I always tell people, it's not going to look exactly like this, but we went from an 8-acre parking lot to something that looks like this, which is very doable. Park it, you know, you can park it. It creates improved drainage. It comes in this particular area, there are residential neighborhoods on either side of it. So it really becomes, you know, not just a place, a village center here, but it becomes a destination that serves the surrounding residential communities. You know, the type of commercial uses you're going to have in there are going to be professional offices, small businesses, bakeries, gyms, medical offices. So I just offer this is that I think there's opportunities to do things similar in Bridgewater, and I'll get to one of those sites in a few minutes, but involving the public in these types of conversations. So it's not just being dropped in on them. And these are the types of developments you get when you do these types of projects. I mean, nothing here is more than 4 stories. The upper left is Mashpee Commons. I mean, that's not that far away. The bottom 2 pictures are South County Commons off of Route 1. You know, these become destinations. They have green space, they have commercial uses, they bring people in from outside the area. They also serve those residents that are in the area, and they become a destination for people. So I think, you know, if we look back at what was included in the comprehensive master plan, there was discussion about concentrating development where you have infrastructure in place. If you concentrate that development where you have infrastructure in place, it takes pressure off those areas of town where we don't want to see further development or infrastructure doesn't exist. Again, these are just different types of housing that you can get when you do these types of projects. So one of the other recommendations within the plan was to have architectural and site design standards. I totally agree. So how do we do that? So 20 plus years ago, when I worked in Arlington, Virginia, I was part author of adopting form-based code. And what form-based code is a very predictable document that the community, the town, and developers all can look at and say, okay, this is what the community wants to see in a particular area. It talks about design guidelines. It talks about street trees. It talks about the type of materials, the type of uses. You're typically creating more density than you have there now, but that's exactly what the goal is. The predictability for developers are they check all the boxes that are part of the form-based code. They go through the approval process in an expedited manner, in a predictable manner, that this is what the community asked for. The community is part of designing what these form-based code restrictions are. But the fact that a developer can get a project approved in 9 months versus 2 or 3 years, cost savings to them is very significant, and it becomes very attractive. The fact that a developer can come to a meeting to talk about his project and know that the community is supporting it because it meets all the requirements of the form-based code is a real attraction. So, you know, the benefits of it are you get rid of those 1960s, the first slide that I showed with the one-story park in the front. It's an intelligent increase in density. It creates improvements to infrastructure. It creates different types of housing opportunities at mixed income levels, both for sale and rental. It preserves the historic character of the downtown area and also the agricultural rural characteristics outside of the downtown, and it creates more tax revenue for the town. So this is just a page out of this. The Columbia Pike Initiative is where the first that we used this in Arlington 20 years ago. But this is just one page out of the regulating plan. This is like a 300-page document. But again, this is the playbook that a developer can look at and say, okay, if I check all these boxes, these are all the things that the community wants to see. If they want to do that, then they understand what the approval process is going to be. It doesn't require that a developer use the form-based code, but it does mean that if they don't, they're going to go through the normal development process. So I know that you had, people were teasing me earlier that I looked at one of your YouTube meetings from last August, and I wanted to do that because I looked at it before I met with the developers of the Foundry site. I personally don't like that project. I mean, I can't do anything to stop it at this point, but if you had form-based code, you wouldn't have this project. I mean, I personally have no expectation that they'll overbuild the commercial space because I don't know who's going to go in that commercial space, but this is not, form-based code does not get you a project that looks like this. This site is exactly the same size as the Ocean State job lot site. So, I mean, if you could reimagine, now it's got some challenges, it's got the river, but there's more we could do with that site than this. Now, we may not be able to derail that, but I just throw that out there that I think that Bridgewater has a real opportunity to distinguish itself, and I'll get into this in a little bit further in terms of how we approach development and what expectations we have of developers with respect to development. So in my business, it's all about creating a sense of place, and what I like to say is create a there. I mean, that there's some sense of community that people feel like they're in a special place. I will buy anybody coffee that can tell me where nearby this project is. And arguably, the slide on the left makes a good argument why you should underground utilities. But
Downtown Plymouth, right at the entrance.
yeah. So this is a really, I mean, I don't necessarily like the materials, but I do like the idea that, this is a 3-story building and the entire ground floor is all commercial or retail. And it works. So, we can go to Mashpee, we can go to Plymouth, we can see projects like this. So the next thing I want to talk about is transit-oriented development. I mean, one of the number of reasons why I was excited to accept this position in Bridgewater. One of them was because the university was here. One of them was because you had South Shore Rail. And I think there's real opportunities that can happen with that. So transit-oriented development, for you that don't know, I'm not going to read the entire slide. I can send you all the slide deck when I'm done. That really is talking about concentrating development near your MBTA stations, so that people don't have to drive, that they can walk from where they live. to the train station, commute to where they need to commute to. The additional density that you create in this area allows you to bring in a higher level of retail, allows you to bring in more professional office space. I will say that where the train station is now is absolutely the wrong spot, because that doesn't lend itself to TOD at all. Again, going back to what the comprehensive master plan said, all of the things that we're talking about with transit oriented development, we can check those boxes as it relates to those recommendations and goals. This is all short term. As I said before, you concentrate development where you have infrastructure, takes pressure off the outside areas of the town. So my new job lot plaza is Campus Plaza and the Foundry site. We slide the train station down to where it used to be and look to redevelop the Campus Plaza. Campus Plaza hasn't changed since I was here in 1977. And I was shocked to see that Flatley had, some years ago sold it to Federal Realty. Federal Realty is one of the largest real estate investment trusts in the country. This has to be the absolute worst piece of their portfolio. This is not what they do. They do transit oriented development. They do the type of projects that you see in Plymouth. So I've been reaching out to them to look at, how do we rezone this area? One of the things that we were doing on Metacom and in Warren was by increasing the density and allowing more density in these types of locations, you are in essence putting money in that developer's pocket. You're giving them currency. You're giving them something that they didn't have before. In exchange for that, so in Rhode Island, we were using tax increment financing, but when I was in Arlington, Virginia, we gave more density along the metro stations. If you look how that area has been built out, we get contributions from developers. So, if we need improvements to infrastructure, if we need more money for parks, whatever it is, because that developer is getting density and the town is doing the zone changes, we're partners. There's skin in the game. You're in a position to leverage them. But if you look at the potential of both this site and the Foundry site to be, a nucleus for transit-oriented development, I think there's such a big opportunity for Bridgewater to distinguish itself from any other community that's a suburban community that has rail. Middleborough's not going to do this. I mean, it's all the stars aligned, plus the fact that, we have the college here, or the university. So, I mean, I think my job is to kind of think out of the box a little bit and, see where the council wants to go with this, see where the planning board, but I think this is a real wonderful opportunity that we can start to work on together, hopefully, in order to effectuate the change that the town wants to see. I do want to talk about infrastructure. I mean, legitimately, I have concerns with respect to wastewater. I have concerns with the amount of potable water that's available. Very familiar with wastewater. I oversaw the upgrades to Warren's wastewater treatment plant, which was a $21 million upgrade. So there are challenges that Bridgewater has with respect to its water table. There's no likelihood that the environmental protection is going to give you an increase in terms of the discharge from the existing plant. I think that, one of the things we need to look at is, whether or not we make developers do what we call wastewater package plants, which are treatment plants on site. In exchange for additional density, do we look for contributions to improve infrastructure? The way that we can do that is you embed that requirement within the form-based code, which gets embedded into the zoning changes. I think we need to partner with mass development regarding the DIF funding. And also, and I had this conversation with Michael today, consider a home rule petition to allow for the implementation of impact fees. Right now, the only area in Massachusetts where there can be impact fees is Barnstable County. And impact fees can be whatever you want them to be. That could be for infrastructure, that could be to offset impacts to schools. But I mean, I think these are all things that are going to need to be on the table going forward. Just calculations with respect to water and wastewater. quite honestly, we're right up against kind of what the daily max is at the wastewater treatment plant now. There might be about 200,000 gallons on an average that what it's able to treat on a daily basis. That doesn't, we can't talk about the type of transit oriented development that we want to do unless we address the infrastructure issues, because one of the first questions that developers ask is what's the capacity of the infrastructure? So, I mean, it's something we have to address. But it just gives you kind of a heads up in terms of what these impacts are. I know that, there's been some discussion about holding off on development. I don't think that that's the conversation we want to have. I think that as we look at Campus Plaza as an example, that's probably a 5 to 6 year process to work through those zoning changes, work with the developer, work in terms of what the upgrades to infrastructure are. With respect to Claremont, I know that they have grandiose plans for expansion, but I also have some concerns that they might be up against the cap of what their approved daily capacity is. That by default, I think that's a moratorium that self-imposed, because that cap is something that they agreed to. It's not something that the town necessarily imposed on them. They walked into that. So I think we need to not be afraid to talk about capacity, but it's definitely something we need to talk about. Long-term, working with universities, that's a non-starter for me. We have to do that now. And I've shared that with Michael and Kimberly, and I think we're moving in that direction. So moving forward, I guess my questions are, is this the direction that the town wants to move in? I think it's important that we engage property owners and developers regarding what the collective vision for the town is, engage business owners and residents with respect to that, and then engage our state and federal delegation with respect to holistically, how are we doing smart growth? We're looking to consolidate development where we have infrastructure. The state is pushing MBTA communities. I think we can be a model for what that looks like. There's plenty of federal money out there still for infrastructure, looking for state and federal funding with respect to that. The home rule petition, as I said, for impact fees, and looking at DIF funding. Working with this board to revise zoning ordinances to allow for more density and work on adopting the form-based code. And then again, I can't stress enough the need for us to collaborate with the university. So with that, I will end my conversation and then open it up to you all for questions, comments, criticisms.
So anybody from the board that has questions for Bob, feel free to ask.
If I could just make a comment. I mean, I don't have any specific questions. I mean, I think that was quite a presentation. You've obviously done a lot of homework in the last month since you've been on board, and that's impressive. I hope some of this can come to fruition. I mean, it's just it's a beginning, and hopefully we can work this way. Thanks.
Thank you. I mean, I know that Michael asked me today, he said, how soon could we get started on some of these things? I said, well, I'm doing the presentation to the planning board tonight, and I'm going to do the similar presentation to the council next Tuesday. So I think we can start next Wednesday.
Great. I would agree. It was a very good presentation, and I do hope a lot of it does come to fruition.
I think the only way it will come to fruition is that we all have to be collectively in agreement on the direction that we're going to go. I think that I don't like to prolong having public meetings, but I think we owe the public more opportunity to see, okay, this is the vision we can articulate it better and more clear, but I think this is a win-win for everyone. I drive up from Rhode Island, and as I'm coming in at 104 in the morning, I'm watching the traffic that's going out to 24. And I'm thinking to myself, if we had the type of professional services and retail that could capture these folks on weekends and at night, we can have a very vibrant downtown area. And I'll just share this because I'm transparent. When I first had I think it was the first week I was here, we had a meeting with the developers on the Foundry site, and I shared with them, would you consider doing something like we had done in Rhode Island? And the one of the representatives for the developers said, well, what do you think this is, Newton? Well, I don't think it was Newton, but I mean, I was almost insulted by that because, I think Bridgewater is a very special place, and I don't want developers to feel like whatever they come in here and do, they're doing us a favor.
Right.
Development works when there's a partnership between the community and the developer. And I think that, the community is showing that it's looking out of the box in terms of doing some things that help development. But I also think that, just similar to Roger Williams wanting to build off campus, some of their facilities and some of the housing Roger Williams was interested in, because education is changing. So part of their curriculum is they have a heavy focus on doing executive learning programs in the summertime. So they were looking for, something that was more than a dorm for those people to stay in that had plug and play capacity. But then they could also use for graduate students or law students during the school year. So, I mean, I think that, having conversations with the university in terms of some of the programs that they're doing, if they have expansion, but, also, whether it's cybersecurity or their involvement in offshore wind, do we have the ability to attract businesses that can benefit from having access to the university and those programs is something that we need to have conversations about.
I do have one question. You brought up the wastewater issue and obviously drinking water too. How do you get around that in terms of, you're talking about this kind of development?
The way that, package plans could work is that, they're either going to discharge into the ground like a septic system would, or they would perhaps, apply for their own discharge permit, depending on what the location of where it is. My understanding is that the town has had conversations with Environmental Protection about increasing the discharge permit at our plant. Now, it doesn't seem like that's going to happen, but there might be alternative sites. Or again, I mean, I think there's a lot of advanced technology out there now with respect to wastewater that is not necessarily that expensive. I think I had an example for if you were treating 30,000 gallons of wastewater on a daily basis, it might be an additional cost to the developer of about $600,000, which I'm amortizing that over 25 years, 30 years. It's a rounding error.
What about the drinking water though?
Drinking water is definitely a little bit more problematic because, I mean, that's in God's control, right? So, I mean, I think that's something, I know that we have wells. I mean, I think it's restrictions on what we're able to withdraw from those wells. I mean, I think that may become a political question in terms of allowing us additional capacity, but the other thing, people don't understand about when you're discharging wastewater into the ground, the recharge of that is into potentially drinking water. I mean, it's offensive to people sometimes, but that's really how it works.
Are you all set?
Yeah, thank you.
Bob, thanks for coming today. I love the village style. I think that, I went down to Frisbee Village and we were looking to permit Broad Street. And I just looked at the different building types and designs and architecture instead of these big square buildings with flat tops and 100 units in a building. I don't think these big apartment buildings do anything for anybody downtown. And I love the village style. I mean, I really envision that on the Perkins property, and I envision that on the campus plaza property. And I think you're right in terms of phasing. We'd end up with this money. But I think we do a lot of these huge. I don't think these 4-story, 150 unit apartment buildings do anything for downtown. I really hope we can get all developers to go this way downtown.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the opportunity is that if we're able to smartly do Campus Plaza and the Foundry site and start to energize Central Square, suddenly those two pieces come together. And I mean, it's a short walk from Spring Street up to downtown. But right now, doesn't feel comfortable for people to do that, particularly at night. So, I mean, the critical mass that you can create there, I mean, could really support, new restaurants coming in, smaller commercial, good tenants coming in. And again, I've seen this in the 5.5 years that I was in Warren in terms of, what we were able to backfill in our downtown. Water Street and Warren became a destination for foodies. We filled in Main Street by, doing some facade improvements with ARPA money. That those businesses are all local. We had a bookstore that's thriving. We had a pasta shop. So, I mean, I think those are the types of businesses that we want to attract. That, there's probably people that exist in the community now that because of COVID, they've had life changes or they're thinking about doing something different, that as they evolve out of their bedroom office or, whatever they're doing in their kitchen, those are opportunities that I think we want to let people know exist. So,
So I guess my question is, and it's disappointing to hear that some developers downtown may not want to look this way, but and I know our current zoning isn't perfect, but our current zoning does say that if you want to separate, commercial from residential on various parcels, it should mimic a village center. I mean, don't you think now we have, I think we need to do exactly what you're saying and update the zoning to make it more village style. I think it's very attractive. Something like a Mashpee Commons or that look or something like that would be absolutely beautiful. I probably, Steve is the architect of our group. I just think these monstrous clown type buildings in the center of town are terrible. We should try to push all developers this way. I think this is great. Did you hear any of that?
Yes.
Anybody else? Ted? Jay? No?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. I've seen, spent some time, about a year actually, going through Warren, to and from work. I was working down in Bristol. So I've seen some of the development down there that has occurred over the past few years. I think everything that I've heard and seen tonight is excellent. I like the reception that Bob's words and images received. So I think it's very promising. I did a lot of head nodding in agreement with his words and the follow-up words that you guys have had. It's something that if anybody knows my thoughts on our town and where we're going, this is very good news to hear, and I'm kind of excited about it.
me too.
Honestly, I think the difficult part, not having clear guidelines, is we get these buildings that aren't that attractive, right? And developers come before us, and it turns into a fight. It's like the planning board against the developer, or the planning board against the council, because the council just wants something done, but the planning board thinks it's ugly. And we try. So I think that if we have clear design guidelines, that's going to take a lot of pressure off everybody, the developer, us, everybody. And it's gonna turn out to be what we want. We're gonna have that mix of residential and commercial. And my fear for some of these big projects downtown is just what you're saying. If we're gonna have these massive commercial spaces that either never get rented or never get built, because they're gonna go build the residential units out back, and it's not gonna be in conjunction with the commercial piece, and then they're gonna say, we don't have a market for it. They're just gonna come back for more residential. So, I mean, I guess from my perspective, after you show us the different scenarios downtown, anything you can do to push these developers that way now, in my opinion, would be great.
And that's what, one of the things I did in Warren is, I set my office up to be what I call the concierge. So if developers are coming in the town, they'll tell me what you want to do. And I can tell you right away whether the town has an appetite for it or not. And if I thought it could work, but the zoning didn't allow it, then we could work together to navigate our way through it, but I could bring the appropriate people to the table. I sat in at a meeting, as I said last week, that, the comment was made that we're not a development friendly community, which was a little bit scary to me, that that's not the perception any community wants to have. But again, I think it was day 3 or 4 that I was here, I mean, I shared with people, on the Broad Street project that I don't like it. And they understand that, they put money into it and they've a couple of years into this, but I think they need to understand, where the community wants to go. And, what two things offended me. The first meeting when he said, do you think you're Newton? Then when I talked to him about what they were proposing now, and I asked him, what they were using for siding, and he said they were going to use vinyl siding. I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. I mean, I think that, you do have some ability to direct what you're going to approve. And I think the fact that there's a vision, and if the council is behind that vision, then the developed community needs to understand that that vision is, and ultimately they win because they're going to get more than they could have gotten previously. And it's not going to be as painful as it would be if they're going to fight us every, inch of the way.
MJ, anything?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First and foremost, Mr. Rulli, welcome to the town. I haven't had a chance to meet you in person yet, but hopefully in the next few months, I may have some time that avails itself to me to be able to sit down and talk with you a little more.
Be great.
First and foremost, I do agree with you. Your biggest challenge here in the town of Bridgewater, having been a resident here almost all my life, with the exception of a few years here and there, your biggest challenge is definitely going to be buy-in from the community. I know that anytime we have new types of concepts or new types of ideas, there can be, in some cases, some pushback, just because there may not necessarily be a wealth of information that folks may be easily able to obtain or acquire, so that they have a better understanding of the concepts that we're talking about or discussing, or even some of the definitions of some of the programs which you reference. So my best encouragement to you right now, and something I'm more than happy to talk to you about at length on various things too. My email is always open. My phone number, I think, is probably available. Shane has it somewhere. I think the biggest thing is community engagement. And in Bridgewater, we've had, in my experience, we've had issues with community engagement. Believe it or not, a long time ago, in a different lifetime, this town had been offered the area where I'm currently living to be the mall, and it eventually ended up going to Silver City Galleria, which I guess
Good for them.
no thanks is now extinct. But the thing is when you have opportunities that avail themselves in that present time, there is blowback sometimes from members of the community that may not necessarily feel that those are in the best interest of the town. So my best suggestion right now is hit the ground running, but make sure every little detail is out there that folks can easily take like on a plate and just take and crunch a bit, because it can be a bit frustrating and difficult when you're offering things. And from my own personal perspective, I served on the master plan committee here in town for about 5 years. And I know one of the biggest issues we had was a concept called transfer of development rights, which involved using the development rights of one particular part of town to transfer them to another part of town to try to get better density and better community growth, almost similar to the hub development you're talking about with the rail station. My biggest concern is if something like that offered again, folks who may have long memories may be like, well, this is just that whole transfer development rights concept all over again. So just go into it with an open mind, but also make sure the community can easily understand and quickly buy in on things.
Yeah, I thank you for that. I mean, I think that, transfer development rights, and big cities, we call them transfer of air rights. That's not what we're talking about. I mean, I think there's some similarities in Warren, that there were people that lived in the rural section of the town that have been there for generations and saw any change to be a bad thing. But at the same time, change happens, and COVID has definitely accelerated what suburbs and communities look like beyond anyone's wildest expectations. And the new normal, I think, is still undefined, but what we did with Market to Medicom, we set up its own website. I mean, everything we ever did was on there. So I think that's something we can look at to do as we start to talk about this. But, I think it's worthwhile to have at least one community charrette in terms of, okay, here's what we're thinking, and, show people examples of what it could be in real life, because there are examples that aren't that far away. But your point is well taken, and thank you. And more than happy to talk about this at any time.
All right, I know there's some town staff and members of the public on. Before we move on from Mr. Rowley, is there anybody that would like to ask a question, make a comment? Cal, please go ahead.
Hi, nice to see you again, Mr. Ruley.
Same
I'm
here,
gonna-
Mr. Hunt.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Nice to see you again, and as you know, I'm the Energy Committee Chair in town, and I would just ask that the Energy and Energy Committee be very closely engaged with any of the public outreach. 20 years ago, generation ago, I worked with my wife and other people for the downtown redevelopment. We had fantastic turnouts. We did a tour of the downtown with 70 people one time, walking the streets. 35 or something like that. My wife is telling me 75. It's in the noise. But the point is, I think that is an absolutely fantastic concept. Your presentation tonight starts the process of educating the town as to what we can do. And I think that, as you do, is step one. So thank you so much for that. Looking forward to helping anywhere I can from an energy perspective or other. I've been here 36 years. I've been engaged with this kind of concepts since 2005. So I'm happy to help anywhere I can. Thank you.
thank you. And I will add that, as part of the form-based code, I mean, incorporating elements with respect to renewable energy is one of the things that we have in there. So definitely appreciate any input and assistance you can offer as we go forward.
Well, one of the things, the PFAS guidelines, the McElwain School, the new building, has a HERS rating of 22 at a whole building, and they follow the PFAS guidelines. So that's the kind of thing I want us to start to incorporate into those form-based things. Thank you.
Bob, and I know you don't get involved in like the DPW stuff, but I have a business in the Central Business District. I rent some space from another insurance agency. And if I just take a left out my door and walk down Broad Street, there's graffiti on buildings, there's trash all over the street. That isn't attractive for people to want to have their businesses down here. I think immediately we need to figure out a way. I've reached out to a town council recently and asked Michael Dutton, but we can't, the trash on the streets and the graffiti on there's 3 or 4 buildings tagged over here now. It looks like hell. So,
I think one of the things we want to look at with some of this potential grant money is, establishing a business improvement district downtown, but we've got to give back something to these property owners that look at the highest and best use for a building now is to charge, weekly for a room. So there's probably something better that can be done there. One of the things that, we did when I was in Warren is a lot of public art. What we found with public art on electric boxes, as an example, and murals, is people didn't tag those. For whatever reason, graffiti people respect public art. So, I think there are a number of things that we can do. But yeah, I think the aesthetics is, if people feel like the town doesn't care, then they're not going to care, right? And that's, we see that a lot in rental housing, where the landlord doesn't care, so the tenants don't care. So, I think collectively, we all have to own part of the problem and collectively own part of the solution. And that's one of the things, that I want to do. I want to engage with the community that we want to make this a special place. We have to do this together. And I don't have all the answers by any stretch. I'm just trying to get the conversation started.
I was shocked today yesterday when I walked down there, and behind the building on the corner, just deserts, there's spray paint all over that now. On the bowling alley, there's spray paint on the side, on the front, on the Friendly's building, there's spray paint all over it. It's just not a good look. And then you look out on the sidewalk, there's boxes blowing around and trash. It's just, if we're trying to attract people and have people care about the downtown, I think, those little maintenance things, if we can get that done in town, it's going to make a huge difference too.
Well, in Rhode Island, we had a statute that was called non-utilization tax, that if you had commercial properties that, hadn't been occupied for over a year and there was really no honest effort to market those, that a community had the ability to add a tax on top of the property tax. And, the idea wasn't that we needed the money. The idea was to incentivize the property owner to do something, and if that meant taking the building down, then do that. But, I think there are a lot of tools that we can put in a toolbox that we, should consider as we go forward. But you're absolutely right. I mean, perception is 99% of what people see. And, if that's what they're seeing, then they're going to say, well, this is not a place that maybe I want to spend my money. I look at, I know that, Bridgewater has always been a commuter school from when I was here, but, is there an opportunity to make it less a commuter school, or, make parents, spend more time in the downtown area? I mean, it's such a short walk. So I think there's a lot of things, I think we're a lot closer to where we want to be than people might understand or believe.
Great. Before we move on, any opportunity for questions? Mr. Rulli, you're all set
I think so.
for this presentation anyway?
I characterize my role as to be, what Dick Van Dyke's role was in Mary Poppins. I mean, playing all the instruments and singing, and I mean, it's, I've got good staff, and I think that, working with this board and working with the council and working with other committees in town, I think, we can really create a very special thing in Bridgewater. And that's what I would like my legacy to be, because most likely this will be my last real job.
So do you, just so I move on, without giving you any feedback, and I can try to get some feedback before we go to council, do you want an endorsement from us on the village zoning type, or just?
I mean, I would say that it doesn't need to be official. I mean, I would just say that, again, in your conversations with different council members and people in the community, encourage them to, reach out to our office to learn more about it, to suggest ways that we can communicate with the community on it. But, if encourage council members to have an open mind. I mean, I'm looking forward to, I've met, I think, 4 of the 9. It's important to me that I know that what I'm doing is what they want to do. Blind side is everybody's bad side. I know that, Michael and Kimberly are aligned with what we're doing, but I haven't had the luxury of meeting all the council members yet. So, I mean, Tuesday will be an opportunity to share this with them.
Well, I think you know where I stand. I like the much smaller, multiple building scenario than massive building. So I'll leave it at that. Anybody else want to give their opinion, and then we can let Mr. Rulli move on? No. Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, yes.
Just thanks for the presentation and your time.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate the opportunity. As I said, I mean, Shane is the planner, but I think it's important for me to participate in these meetings. So that is my plan going forward. Not to talk as much as I did tonight, but to be here.
Great. Okay, I've lost my agenda. Let me bring my agenda back up. All right, so we have item 5 of the business. This is planning board business. So we have the planning board minutes of December 19th, 2018. This is our executive session in regards to the solar farm. I read these, Shane. I had a couple of typos that on one of these, it wouldn't have been these, because it was we were referring to Mr. Haley as Mr. Hurley, but I think we already fixed that, so I think I'm all set with these. Did anybody read the planning board minutes of December 19th, the executive session? And does anybody want to make a motion on those minutes?
This executive session was not solar farm.
No, this was back in 2018, right? I think the litigation.
Oh, okay, all right, okay.
This is from, yes, this is from 5 years ago.
And
I
what-
think-
Not the one from last week
I think
or
that's-
last meeting.
it's
I-
taken 5 years.
Well, I think the litigation is finally over.
Oh, I
So
see.
Correct.
I'll make the motion.
do we have a second by Mr. Geller?
Yep,
Any discussion? Mr. Geller?
yes,
Mr. Jimmy?
Yes,
I'm a yes. Board and committee reports, Shane, Mr. Tansy?
In terms, I thought this was for the, I'll talk during the planners report. So I was assuming this was gonna be either something from, community preservation or, tree committee or any other boards or committees.
So, Mr. Jimmy, do you have anything for the,
just as I alluded to earlier, the tree committee meets on the 14th, which is the day before the next planning board meeting, and hopefully at that time, the 2 new members will be approved by the council, and they will be part of the tree committee, which will be a full committee, and will hopefully be able to give some sort of, maybe, I'm not sure, a detailed recommendation regarding the trees that Shane had brought up in his recommendation. So that's it.
all right, so I'll be quick. I have attended 2 or 3 of the CPA meetings. I unfortunately was unavailable last Wednesday evening to attend the CPA meeting. Just a couple of items. We approved some windows, rather large window projects for the senior housing Hemlock Drive. There was some money approved for the mobile station taking. And we're considering 2 lots that abut the East Files property, as well as keeping Hanson Pond and a few other things on the radar. So I'll have a more detailed report after the next meeting. I apologize. I was not able to attend the last Wednesday's meeting. So. All right. Any other community reports any board members would like to present? Finance report.
Sure. 2 items, actually probably 3. One item is in the process of reviewing another site plan review application that'll be before the board probably sometime in March. Additionally, in March is the Citizen Planning Training Collaborative Conference. It is typically St. Patrick's Day weekend. So if any board members are interested in attending the all-day matter for some training credits for just to learn about planning stuff and zoning stuff, feel free to reach out to us. We do have some monies available. We are also dealing with we have a request for Old North Estates for the second lot to be released. So the applicant has done some work. However, this is the project that the applicant did request a major modification. We told the applicant to come in with a major modification and some changes to the plan. So I'm working with Mr. Costa on that, and I expect him to be at the next meeting so he can kind of give a presentation, as well as we'll provide an update for work that has been completed since the last bond estimate. We are additionally looking at some flooding issues as well on South Street. We've reached out to many of the butters near the property for that situation with a culvert and some water and flooding issues. So we're working on that matter and trying to make that determination if it's more of a planning board issue in terms of the subdivision, or if it's more of kind of a private matter between a couple parties. So we're kind of making that determination through some staffing. So we're talking to and communicating with the owner of the subdivision, as well as abutting neighbors as well, to kind of give some feedback and kind of collect our information to kind of progress with that situation. So that may be something we see on an upcoming agenda, but we're still kind of working on that information at this time.
Shane, where is the site plan that you referenced that's coming in? Where will that be?
I believe it's on Winter Street.
Is that a commercial project or?
I believe it is, yes.
And then, the issue on, I know we received a letter from, Mr. Tanzi regarding the South Street issue.
That's correct.
But that's something that has to go through DPW and,
We're in the process of making that determination. Like I said, it was at first recommended as a planning board action, or something that the planning board can look into, but now I'm kind of looking it over and trying to determine if what measurements we could possibly take, or what measurements that we could have just as a basic communication with the abutting properties, as it may not necessarily be a planning board issue.
you've kept both parties involved and the private parties involved.
Well, yeah, I think it's currently we're looking at 3 parties right now. So we're trying to keep them involved. I've communicated with a few of the parties recently as yesterday. But I'm keeping that line of communication open with everyone just to progress this issue along. So that's all I have for now.
Any other board member questions for Shane? Mr. Tanzi, did you have anything for us tonight or?
No, I think everything that's been said is complete. I don't have anything else to add.
Any, before we wrap up, is there anybody here from the public that would like to speak about anything? Or I see some members of the public here. Okay. See that. So we have item 6, adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
By Mr. Jemian, do we have a second?
Second.
By Mr. Geller? Mr. Geller,
Yep.
is that a yes?
Yes.
Mr. Jemian?
Yes.
No, yes, so. Welcome, Bob, and good night, everybody.
Good night.
Hey, everyone.
Right.
Take care.
Thanks.